Okay, so I've put together this video following a request from a colleague of mine to give him an overview as to how I conduct testing e-commerce websites, CRM systems, and that sort of platform. So just to begin with the video, this is purely for educational use. It's not to benefit financially. So it's purely like I mentioned. Hopefully it benefits the person that's requested for this. And also if you stumble across this video just through a YouTube search, hopefully you pick one or two things from it as well. And if you have any feedback as well, that's always welcome. As one person does not know it all. There'll be things that I do differently or things that you can spot, an easier way of doing things, and I'm willing to learn from you as well. So I've selected next.co.uk. It's one of the e-commerce sites that I tend to use personally myself. I have an account on there. I shop from there from Next, so it's a platform I know quite well. And since it's since literally it's a platform I know, I thought it would be a good challenge to try and automate, maybe mimic one of a typical example or a typical scenario I would do in my real life when I'm on here trying to shop. Now, this framework has been put together for some time now. Professionally, I've not been automating at a workplace for some time now. So, as part of practicing and keeping that skill set refresh or keeping that knowledge there, I tend to play around with some of the tools and try to stay relevant really in the market. So yes, if we jump into it, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the WebDriver to navigate onto next website and then try and perform try and navigate through the site as if a real user would. So the first thing that will happen is it will land on this page. Behind the page is the landing page. However, the first prompt they get is a cookies banner, and on here it will select one of these options. Now, from memory, when I put this together initially, it's been months since I've looked at it. It will select the first option, which is accept all cookies. And then typical example as to what it will do, it will either click onto the search bar and search for a product, or it will hover over one of the tabs and then make a selection from one of the sub menus in here. So yeah, I think it will select footwear. It will then filter through some of these filter options. So brand being one of them, it will select a brand in here, it will select a size in here to narrow down the product it's looking for, and then it will select a product once it's found one. It will then progress to select a size from the drop down menu and then add it to the bag, and then it will attempt to sign in as well. And I believe that will be the end of the test I'll try and show on in this short video. So if we go on to the background, what we have here is the IDE that we are trying to use. This is InteliJ, and in here I've set up a very simple test framework. And if I go through the configurations to begin with, and then we can jump into running one of the tests to see how it performs. So the very first thing to notice is we have this pom.xml file. The in here sits all dependencies we require to run our Cucumber test. So we've got a few things in here. There's reference of Selenium. There's Cucumber as well, another dependency, and then there's few things as well. So we've got JUnit on line 59, and in a nutshell, that's we've got a few things as well, but we've got Maven as well. So that is what we've got here. And then moving on from there, we've got what we call utilities. So utilities will contain a class which has the configuration for the driver. Selenium WebDriver. So the driver, literally when invoked, it will be the one that will run the instructions which we give it. So this is some of the settings in here. We've nominated a couple of browsers which we can run when we select. So the one of them is Chrome browser. We've got Firefox, and then we've got Safari as well. So each of these have or has its own web driver, and then we can decide which browser we want to use to run our test. And then moving on from there, we've got a properties reader, and this is a configuration that will read our properties in here. So if we go onto our properties, what we have is we have a URL which points to next.co.uk, and then we've got a test username and password which I use. This, for reference, is not my real password or my real account. It's just a test account which I've created. So moving on from there, that covers the utilities, and the way the way I've configured this is we're using the page objects model. So with that, we are categorizing, or we are putting uh, our pages that you find on here into what we call classes. And then in each class will have its own properties. So when I say properties, I'm talking things like web elements, so element locators, and also some constructors which the driver can use to begin the whole process. So typically, we'll go through the pages shortly, but one of the pages is what we call a landing page. And in a landing page, we've got a few things on here. As you can see, it's fairly busy. So we've got all these tabs on here. In that class, we will have, we'll make reference of the women tab, the men tab, all the way up to clearance tab. There will be some other things on here as well. It's purely dependent on the test I'm trying to run. If I pick up or create a random scenario to mimic, if it needs something on this landing page, which is currently not in its class, then I'll inspect it and then add it to that class. So it will then go to another page from here once the test is being run. So assuming it comes to the footwear page, the footwear page will have its own class, and it will have its own properties as well, which is the element locators as well. So if we go back into the framework, we have what we call pages, and what we have is we have a package, and in that package sits multiple sub packages or subfolders, and I've titled them page. So as you can see on here, so shopping bag. If we expand shopping bag, for example, it will have a shopping bag page. Now, what these pages are is basically a class, like I said, which has its own properties. So if we go onto the landing page, that's probably is this, and then the user management page that do not have its own folders. So that is the landing page, as I mentioned. At the very top of the page, what we have is we've made the class public, so it can be called from any other classes, and we've got our um, driver details on here as well. And then moving on from there, like I mentioned before, we have our element locators on here. So some of them are, we've got some XPath, we've got IDs, and we've got other methods as well, other forms of other types of locators we can use. So that pretty much covers this page. We've got other pages as well. So for example, select, let's go for the checkout page. As you can see, we've got a few elements in there. This is still work in progress. Like I said, it's purely, I only play with this when I basically have some, downtime, or I feel like I'm being rusty or I'm not remembering things. I'll just come on here, play with it a bit, and then just to refresh the skill. So that's the setup of our pages. As you can see, each page represents a screen, and behind the screen sits, like I said, the properties which the WebDriver will interact with. So that's the makeup of the page. And moving on from pages, we have a step definition. Okay, before we come to the step of definition, let's go to features. So we have what we call features, a features folder, which sits under resources. And in the features is what contains our BDD Gherkin syntax really. So basically our test case. So if you picture a traditional web development team or product team, we have user stories. Well, we have our pick, and then we have our user stories, which are broken down into fast achievable tasks. And each task is basically a scenario which we need to try and achieve. And then what happens is the developers go and build it, testers will test it, and then eventually it moves on across the pipeline to into in eventually end goal is to get them into production. So if we pick one of the tests which we'll run today, this is I've titled it "Add Adidas Men Trainers into a Basket." Like I said, this is purely for my practice, so please don't put too much emphasis on how I've named things in here. So as you can imagine, at the end of each of these, I've put dot feature that helps change it into a Cucumber runnable file. And in here is my scenario. So we've got the feature which we're trying to run. So I guess adding items into a basket. But I guess the feature itself would be making sure that the checkout basket runs fine. And then I've got my scenario as well. So briefly, as a user on the next website, I want to hover over the men's tab and add Adidas trainers to the basket after signing in. So that's what we're trying to do, signing into my account. So that's what we're trying to achieve on here. And then we've got our steps. So given I land on the next page and I hover and I click trainers, and then you can see there's a few steps in there to achieve what we're trying to what we're trying to achieve. So what happens is we write our we write our BDD style or Gherkin style test case. However, we need to give each of these steps an instruction to run. So in order to achieve this, we have something we call step definition. So step definition is nothing but a set of classes which contains the instructions each test case needs to execute the test itself. So behind each of these steps is an instruction. So if we pick one of them, let's just say user filters the brand to Adidas, and then we select it, it will take us to the step definition for it. So as you can see, to make it easier for me and readable, I've got here add Adidas men trainers into basket, and within the step definitions folder, I've got a class which is add Adidas men trainers as well. That's the step definition for it. So if we come in here, again, like I said, it's a class of its own, and usually I set them to public so that it can be communicated or it can be accessed by another class. So we've got to begin the page, we've made reference to each of these pages. So if I expand this, it will make a bit more sense. So we've put some dependencies in here in terms of classes which it needs to communicate with, and then we've given them variables. So rather than it makes it easier when scripting for the with the instructions, we can just call the variable and then it communicates with that class directly, and then it will pick something from that class. Moving on from there, so our first test when we looked at our Gherkin is for it to land on the next page and then for it to hover over the men's tab. So as you can see on here, so given that the user hovers on over the men's tab, I've tried to explain what this is trying to achieve, and what it's doing is picking the element locator for that men's tab on the next page, and then it's performing an action which is an hover over action, and then in a nutshell that is what it's trying to achieve. You will see frequently that I put in thread.sleep. This is to allow the website itself to render and catch up with the speed of the WebDriver. So what you find is typically the WebDriver is running at speed light, 100 miles per hour, However, the e-commerce site is maybe slowing or not running optimally. So therefore, WebDriver puts that request in. It scans and waits for 1 or 2 seconds, and if it's not happening, it will time out and your test will fail. So for that reason, to avoid that, we set it to we can give it on here. This is 1000 milliseconds, so call it 1 second. And we've got some which is like 5000, so it varies. You'll find them, we've got some 3000s here as well. So all it means is that, once it does this, it hovers over, wait 1 second, and then perform the next action. So when you see these thread of sleeps across the step definition, you know what it's referring to. So moving on to the next step, we've got giving the user clicks on trainers under football header. I believe it's meant to be all footwear header, so that's a typo on from my end. Then what it's meant to do then is on the landing page, like I said, this is just a variable for us to access the landing page class. Inside that landing page, there is another variable called trains link under men's homepage. Again, please ignore the way I've labeled these. What that means is behind this variable sits the element locator, and then once you find this, perform an action which is click. So go into the landing page. In there sits that element locator, and then click it. In a nutshell, that's what it's trying to do. Here's another form of a delay which I've put in place of thread or sleep. I've put like a timeout, wait for another 5 seconds basically. Now moving on from there, so if we pick one last one before we move on, I've got on here user filters the brand to Adidas. So what he's doing is once it's on that product search page, it needs to find the brand button. So if we come on here, this is what we call the product search page. It's looking for the brand element locator, and then once it finds it, the next action is for it to click it. So once you find it, click it. Again, whilst you're on there, when you go into the product search results page, once you've clicked the brand filter, find another checkbox called Adidas. I've just named it Adidas brand men. And then once you find it, click it again. Okay. And then whilst you're there, I believe at the time of scripting this, you had to, so you come back on here, you click on brand, you select Adidas, and yeah, as you can see, the site has literally minimized it itself. But during execution, for some reason, it doesn't. So therefore, you have to force an action in place. So you have to tell it to click it again to minimize it. So that is the reason why we've got a repeat of this here. So expand it, click on Adidas, click on it again to close it in a nutshell. So that is it really, without taking too much time on here. So as you can see, it goes through my steps my steps in my test case, and then it will perform an action until we get to the end. So in a nutshell, that's what it's trying to do. So that covers our feature file and our step definition, which is the instructions that sits behind the feature file. And if we go through here, we have something called the hooks class. The hooks class is simply, the way I see it, is like a pre-requirement for our test to run. So it's things that need to be in place before we can go ahead and run our test. So in there, we have what we call annotations. So at before and at after, two examples of hooks annotations. So this is basically before the test is begun, or before the test begins, what needs to happen. So you can see on here we've got our driver being referenced. We've got some sleep or pause times in here. We've got a properties reader. Remember at the beginning of the video I said there's a properties reader in here, and in there sits few details. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get a driver to access the property reader and then to call the URL. I've currently commented it out, so I believe I didn't need it for now, so I've just commented it out. So if I go back onto that config page, and now it will make sense. So if we can picture it this way, we're asking the WebDriver to access this configuration properties and then look for a URL, a variable called URL, and in that variable is the link for we're trying to access. And again, as I mentioned before, in the utilities folder, we saw a number of browser types. So Safari being one of them. I think we saw Firefox, I think, right? And Chrome. Now we are using Chrome. So if we didn't really want to use Chrome, we can change it here at this point and choose something else, Safari, if that's what the requirement is. So that is that. If we go back to where we were before, I believe the hooks class is where we were. Now, if we move on from this line, which has just been explained, we ask it to maximize the screen. So rather than having a short or a windowed version, so expand it to fill the whole, to capture the whole screen. And then we put some sleeps in there to wait a bit. And then at the very beginning of this recording, I showed a banner for cookies. So here is where we're telling it to click on accept the banner, the cookies banner. And then that's pretty much covers what we're asking, the requirements, or what I feel at the minute is the requirement for my test to run. And then we have our after annotation, and what it's trying to do is once you've performed all these things, or once you perform the test, then you can quit it at this point, which technically means drop the drop the web drop the web driver and also close the browser as well. So that explains what we call a hooks class. We have also a runners class, and if we can expand that class, it's also another form of configuration. Now, what it's trying to do is it's trying to look for paths. We've got, as I mentioned, our feature file contains our test cases. So we've given the path to our test case. So SRC test resources features. So SRC is at the very top. We've got tests, so it will then come in here, and then we've got our resources next, and then features here. So that's basically the path to where our test cases are. Glue has our step definition, which we have somewhere in here. So step definition. The subfolder the package is called step def. So step def, as you can see, and we have our tags. So tags, the simple way to explain tags is if we want to run a number of tests, we don't want to run all of them, we want to run more than one, and the easiest way is for us to use what we call tags. So we can name our tag to anything as long as we have it in the test runner. We then go into whichever test case we're trying to execute and then drop the tag at the top. So if we take this, for instance, store finder, if we're trying to run anything that has store finder in there, we would place that same tag in each of these cases and then place it in our test runner class so that when we run it, it's only running test cases that has that tag in there. So I guess that's a very simple way to explain the use of tags in here. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much covers it. The rest is just, like I said, classes which we will interact with. And once we put our test together, we can then instruct the WebDriver to access these classes and perform an action. So we can tell it to do different things. We can tell it to select a drop-down menu and then pick from there using what we call looping system. For loop being one of the common ones I tend to use in the framework. We can tell it to click into a field and then input some text, for example, and then we can tell it to pick from um, one of the one of the options, that suggested options. We can tell it to click on things as well. So basically, if you picture your typical use as a user on any website, how you play with it, how you access it to your benefit, we can ask this robot to do the same thing, basically, essentially. So if we're done with all of that, I believe I'm trying to make this video as short as possible. I'm sure by this point you have questions, so feel free to message me, drop them in the comment section, and I will come back and try and clarify any doubts that you have. Also, like I said, if you have any feedback, if there's better way of doing things, if I've got something wrong in here, I am always open to learning new things. So please drop that as well, so I can learn from you also. So yes, if you're happy with that, let's try and run one of our tests. So if we double click our test case itself, it's always useful to build a framework first before we run it. So once that's done, we can simply run our feature. If we run our feature, what tends to happen is a test case, or what you call yeah, a test case can have multiple tests in here. So assuming we had maybe 2, 3, 4, 10, then we can just run the feature because they all share the same feature, and then it will run each test that sits in each feature file. But if that's not the case, in our scenario here, we only have one test, then we can just run our scenario, which should be fine as well. So if we select execute, it will log on to next site. It instantly clicked on the accept cookies banner, and the next step I believe is going to hover over the men's tab, which is done now, and then it's going to click all footwear, and then it's going to click the brand as I mentioned. It will pick from the list Adidas in this instance. It will try and close it again or minimize that tab, and then it will click on the size. It will pick a size and do the same as well. It will then move on to, I believe, sorting by order, and at this point it will pick, so in this case, high to low. It goes to color, and it will pick an option from there as well. And these are all part of our test steps. So once that's done, I believe it will click onto it. It will narrow down the products on in the search page, and it will click on one of the products, which in this instance is this nice yellow trainers here, yellow and black trainers, and it will try and perform another action on here. I appreciate this. It's been a long time since I played with this, so there's a potentially it may fail. If it fails, that's fine. It's good learning curve. It means that I need to go back in there, debug the issue, and try to address it. So as you can see on here, there's been some time delay and nothing is happening. So I'm sure something has failed. Occasionally, what tends to happen is, depending on where or who is running this, and frequently you may have the webmaster go and change things, update locators. In that instance, we need to update that as well, which is where putting together a framework with the page object model becomes very useful. And I will explain that in a second. So yes, let's go and find out what's going on. There you go. So you can see on here to my left panel, these are all the steps being executed. It's come back in green, so test passed as you can see, which is good. And any test that fails, we will be notified at this point, and we'll get a very helpful set of information on here to diagnose where the problem lies. And nothing is happening so far. But as I mentioned, I'll explain one of the benefits of using page object model. So assuming our problem, which we will find out in a minute, was down to the fact that the next action it was meant to do, the locator has changed, for instance, right? What we can do very simply is we will be notified in here which step it's failed, and then it will try and give us an idea of what's caused the failure. So assuming it's, like I said, if it's a locator that's no longer the same, that's being changed, all we then need to do is we need to expand our class where that locator is found. Say, for example, if it was checkout page, okay, there's few locators in here. Let's just say it was checkout page and the continue to payment had been changed. Then we just need to come in here, refactor it or rename it, and then what would happen is it will take effect across the entire framework. So we don't need to go and expand each of these classes and find where it's been referenced and then make that change manually. We change in one place, which is where the class which it resides in, and then it will take effect across everywhere in the framework. It's very simple, very easy to manage, and yeah, in a nutshell, that's one of the benefits of using the page objects model. So something is happening here. I believe it's a timeout issue. Okay, so we've got our report back for our error. So if we expand the panel a bit, we can read it. So let's expand to do full screen and try and diagnose the problem. At glance, I can see on here, it says on here, request timed out. So it's try to log on to that page and it's try to do whatever it's trying, intending to do on here. But something has caused the problem and there is now, it's timed out basically. So it failed. The step has failed. So like I said, it's quite helpful in the sense that it will point which step it failed on. So if I select this one, for instance, drop this a little bit, it's failed when trying to choose a size, right? So if we go back onto the site itself, so it's come on here and it's trying to choose a size and it's failed. So I believe it's something wrong with the locator, which is the drop down menu locator, which I will resolve at a later time, not on this recording. So let's see on here. So we've got this as the element locator. I guess it will not do any harm spending a few seconds to have a quick check what the issue is. If we inspect it, find that locator, let's see if it exists. Okay, it doesn't exist. Let's see what's there now. So it says choose size. Okay, quick one. As you learn, this is just a message from my friend who requested for this. I guess as you go through it, all of these will be clearer and it will make sense. So if we inspect and then update that, okay, let's go for div. I'm just trying to set a new um, create replace that locator basically. So div contains. Let's go for text. Okay, so it's found one of one. As you can see, it's literally highlighting. The results suggest that it's just one of one. And that's because I went for the name, the text, rather than maybe an ID or the few things in here. It says on here, I could even use role, I could use class, for example. But the text is there, so let's just use that and we try and amend it in here. So if we click on this again, our error, it brings us straight to this one. So if we try to amend it and then run the test again, hopefully this time around it will pass. Fingers crossed. Um, so let's build it and run it again. And let's see what happens. So you run the test from the start. You can also, I believe you can choose to run it where it stopped for time, but it's not harmful to run it from the beginning. So you go through there, select, navigate through its filters, select a brand, select a size, maybe some color, and it will sort by order as well. So high to low from the last time we ran it. That's what we saw. Color being black, I believe. And then we will pick from our list, which is the colorful black and yellow type of color. Okay. Now, if you can remember, it failed trying to select that drop down. As you can see, we've updated it and it's working now. So hopefully it picks from this list. Uh, let's see. Maybe there's another there's another issue as well, which would have to diagnose and try and fix. But that last run failure has been addressed, and there's clearly another failure somewhere, so that would need to be addressed as well. But I guess so far get a gist of what's happening and how we've put together the framework, how we automate things really. So if you're new to this, then as you learn or as you train, as you play with these tools, it will practice make perfect, right? So it will get better. You never stop learning. I'm yet to learn new things about this. So if you experienced as well, maybe you saw something I did wrong in here, you can, like I said, feed that back to me as well, and I will learn as well going forward. So I believe it was enough for us to bring this recording to an end. Thank you for watching, and yeah, let me hear from you. Take care. Bye.